Last week I shared a message on contentment. All right, contentment. And if you haven't heard it, I would advise you or recommend that you order the CD about it. So I want to follow up. Lord, put it on. Follow that message up with today's message, and I'm going to be talking about hope. 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 Okay. Because I'm looking across our nation. I go online. I listen to what some of you say, what relatives, what neighbors, what I hear on television from Christian programming, and so forth. So this message is like last week's. It's addressed to believers primarily. Okay, that's what it's addressed to. So understanding that we're dealing with Christians, all right. As Christians, what do we do when things don't seem to be working? I'll use the word, when they're not working out as we wish they were working out. And it seems like our faith is just very weak and actually ineffective. What do? We need, at that point, when we reach that point, we have to do something. You know, we can't just say, well, que sera, sera. We just sit back and let things happen, whatever going on. We need to do something, okay? Because we serve a God who can do all things. So you may have told yourself, I'm a believer, but the mountain in my life, okay, people can call it that. There's a mountain in my life, and it just seems too high to climb. There's just something in my life I just can't. I can't make it. So the mountain can be anything keeping you from going forward with the things of God. So I said this message is primarily for believers. Okay? And as believers, our job until the Lord takes us home is to do something with and for God. That's our purpose. I think that's why the Lord just doesn't save us and then snatch us on to heaven. Nobody would want to be a Christian if that happened. Because they say, man, as soon as those people, as soon as they come to Christ, they die. You know, the body stays and the Lord takes us like when a loved one is gone. We deal with the body, but the spirit and the soul go with the Lord. So the Lord could have done that, but no, He leaves us here for a reason. There's work to be done. We're supposed to carry on the work of God, and that's not a chore. I mean, that's an honor and a privilege. He could have had angels do it, and angels don't get up in the morning and say, well, I'm kind of tired today, Lord. Could I just stay home and not go do that what you want me to do? Or, Lord, I really don't want to, I don't agree with it. Angels just say, yes, Lord, and they go and they do. And they do things right. And the Bible calls them ministering spirits. And the Bible says that they're sent forth to minister for us, the heirs of salvation. But they hearken unto the word of the Lord. So God chose not to have angels do it. He chose to have us do the work of the ministry. And then He says, if you do it willingly and you do it with the right attitude, when you finally get to heaven, I'll reward you handsomely for it. I mean, what a deal that we have. Why do we need the main reward that we have is Jesus. We make heaven and miss hell. That's all we really, what more can a person ask for? And heaven, when you read about it, is this glorious place. I can hardly wait to see it and be there. Wow. But on top of that, God says, I'm going to give you rewards, whatever that is. Most theologians that I've read after over the years said that's going to be responsibilities. And you can't limit it just to the planet, this new earth that's going to be. But God has created a universe. So probably, and listen, I'm just saying probably, it makes sense to me, like we're going to have authority over stuff in the universe that God created. I mean, if God has a lot of different forms of life in heaven, maybe, just maybe, there are many different kinds and forms of life in His universe. But excuse me, He's chosen this planet to create man, and He said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. And then He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. God breathed of Himself, of His essence, of His Spirit, into that man. So, this is the highest form of life in the universe. We're made in the image and likeness of God. And finally, through Jesus Christ, the book of Romans chapter 8 says that we can cry, and we do from within. We cry, Abba, which means Father. So we're adopted into the family of God. Wow! What an honor. And on top of that, once again, he's going to give us rewards. I mean, what a deal. So that's the God that we serve. And he's chosen us to do a work while we're here. So instead of looking at our time here like, well, I can hardly wait for the rapture to take place. I can hardly wait for it too. But I've got a job to do. When I see Jesus, I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, son. You didn't do a whole lot, but what you did, thank you. I'm going to reward you for it. That'll be fine for me. So there's a job to do, and sometimes there's a mountain that stands in the way of what we want to do. Okay? And it just seems too high to climb. And it could be anything from going... sometimes people say, well, I just don't have enough time. I'm so busy. And people can be very, very busy. We do live in a rat race. Okay? Sometimes finances. I don't have the finances. Pastor, I've got 2 jobs, or my job is so demanding, and I just don't have the money to do what God wants me to do. Sometimes it's because we're sick. And I have a son at home, Chris. We haven't seen him. He fights with that depression, and his is chemical depression. So when it's up, when the depression is not hitting him, when his chemistry's right, and he's fought this thing since he was 17 years old. He's a school teacher. He does great. He does everything. You've seen him up here. He's preached. He's been studying courses through the Assemblies of God for years, and he's led singing, and he wants to do everything. And he'll stay like that for a while. Then the chemistry changes, and this is what all of the doctors have told him. Okay, this is not just something he's thought up, and the psychiatrist and everything. So in his situation, illness, sickness has kept him from going after the will of God, which is the ministry. That's where his heart is. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes that's keeping people, maybe you. Sometimes it's people keeping you from doing the work of God. People, nobody can bless you like people, and nobody can annoy you like people, right? Don't look around. People are people, right? Sometimes we're in a good mood, sometimes we're in a bad mood. Sometimes you may want to do something for God, but your spouse says, well, we don't need that. And sometimes it's the boss. We like to blame somebody. That's just the way we are. And I didn't hear any amens on that. But whatever's keeping you from doing the will of God, that which is in your heart for God and with God, can be the mountain in your life. So it's just too high for me to climb. So I have a question. A Christian would ask, so how in the world will I ever make it to the top of the mountain in my life with all of these things? The mountain's too light. How am I ever going to get to the top of that mountain? I've got to climb that mountain. And the answer is simple. It says 3 words. You've got to hope. Number 1, and I'll be talking on hope today. You've got to trust God. And thirdly, you've got to climb that mountain. That's the answer. It sounds like, well, that's not much of an answer, but the question again, how in the world will I ever make it to the top of that mountain in my life? How will I ever get to the place where God wants me to be in my life and for my life? I want to get there, but how can I do it? I'm giving you the answer. You've got to hope. And hope is something that believers know little about. That's why I want to share on hope. We usually talk about hope, faith, and the King James says charity. Hope, faith, and love. Well, there's been a lot of preaching on faith and a lot of preaching on love, and it's right. It's right to preach on those things, but very little on hope. And you've got to hope, you've got to trust God, and you've got to climb that mountain. And once again, we're going to look at hope today. Hope is an important element in the life of a believer, and it's often overlooked. So, with that in mind, would you turn with me to the book of Hebrews chapter 11? And there's been a lot of teaching on this concerning faith. Hebrews 11. And we're going to look at the very first verse. I think they're going to put it up on the screen for you. Yes, they have. It's talking about faith here. They call this chapter, Hebrews 11, great chapter. Book of Hebrews is just a great book. But they call it the Hall of Faith. You've all heard of the Hall of Fame, right? And maybe one or more of your favorite athletes made the Hall of fame in whatever sport. So over here we have, they call it the Hall of Faith. It talks a lot about faith. The very first verse says, now faith, such an important element that God requires in our lives. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. There's the word hope. The evidence of things not seen. I'll read it again. And we'll put a pic for you to look at. Faith is, you're going to see different pics come up, little pictures that we're going to show you on the screen. And the first one. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now I usually don't give you a translation, the same verse from a different translation. A number of years ago the Lord impressed upon my heart, don't use other translations, just stick with the translation that you have. And I'll give you a reason for it. The reason is because too many preachers, modern preachers, when they want to say something, they'll just pull something out of a different translation that gives it just a little bit of twist, and it seems to support what they're teaching that is not exactly biblical. And they jump from one to the other, and the Lord in my life was saying, don't do that. That's not the way. That's not the way to teach. But I'll make an exception here because I think it'll fit. The Christian Standard Bible says, now faith is the reality of what is hoped for. Okay? The reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. The proof of what is not seen with the physical eye. Okay? So we're talking about hope and faith, things you don't see. So, let me say this concerning that. Without hope, faith does not work. Faith is so important because God requires that we believe Him and then act on what we believe. There's a small difference between faith and believe. You can believe something, but until you act on it, it's not really faith. Faith is acting on that which you believe. So we have to, the just shall live by his faith. But without hope, faith does not work. It can't work. Faith can't work without hope. It requires hope to work. And that's what this, this is what I want to show you. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So, what is hope? Pastor, you're talking about hope. What is hope? Hope is what you see. Hope is what you see in your mind. We have another pic for that. Hope is what you see in your mind. Okay? You have a destination. You have a place you want to get to. You have a place in God that you want to be at. You have something in God, so you see it in your mind, and that's basically what hope is. You're hoping to get there. You're hoping to do that. You're hoping that God will lead you there. You're hoping that God will give you that. Hope. It is the expectation and what you dream to be or have. I'm trying to give you some definitions that are very practical. So hope is the expectation and what you dream to be or have. Hope is something that is not seen in the physical realm. So we're talking about faith, but the way that faith works, first you got to hope. You've got to go after something. You've got to see something in your mind. You've got to have something to shoot for. Somebody years ago put it this way. I'm not a hunter. I never shot guns or anything, but they talked about a rifle and a scope. So when they wanted to shoot something, and I don't know what it was they were shooting, I don't know if it was a target or whatever it was, they had it in their sights before they could fire, before they could shoot. So you got to get that what God has put in your heart. You got to get it in your sights. You got to see it. And you've got to be deliberate about it. You're not just, anybody here hunt, you don't have to raise your hand, but let's say I'm hunting deer. Okay, and you shouldn't hunt deer unless you're going to eat the meat, venison. That's what a friend of mine told me. He was from Kentucky, and they were raised like that. And he was an ex-Marine, and he knew all about that stuff. So if I'm going to go deer hunting with my rifle, whatever kind of rifle they use. I can't just start shooting somewhere and hope I hit a deer, right? Man, you can't hunt no deer over here. And there's just not too many deers here. There might be deer all over the place. Somebody else is shooting and they got a deer, and you have to aim, right? You got to be very careful. You got to be very precise. You got to be very deliberate. Find the buck or whatever they call that thing, that deer, and then aim precisely and go through all the right things. And then if you fire, you might get that. You're probably going to get that deer. So that's the way. That's hope is seeing, having a mental picture, if you will. That's what you're hoping for. So. Romans 8, 24 and 5. We'll go to the book of Romans, Romans chapter 8. Great book. Verses 24 and 5. For we were saved in this hope. We were saved in this hope. Pay attention to the word, particular attention to the word hope in these verses. For we were saved in this hope. But hope that is not seen